little storytelling. So from a thank you standpoint, we talk about Edison and people. And again, you can hear Bracken talk a lot. I think just you could feel it, how much he cares about humans and people, how much he cared about me in his talk. And that's really what you see in innovators. And Edison absolutely understood people, how to shape people, and how people shaped him. And so in my thanks, I want to thank those who shaped me. I've got, you can feel it from Eric coming up here. I've got so many people in my life who have added to who I am and share this award. And so I want to thank them quickly and say, all of my friends who've come from all different places, from back where I grew up in some of those kind of pictures you've seen, all the way to people that I've met through my career, through college, being in Boston. Lots of my friends who are basically family. Thank you all for being here, and especially my co-workers in both Material Impact and Breakthrough Energy Ventures, and my CEOs who, shoulder to shoulder, we work really hard to build companies and products that matter. I want to thank my family, my biological family, because I feel like all these folks are like family to me, and my friends, and I want to thank them for coming, but I'm going to give a special thanks to my stepmom, Janet, for showing up, and also my aunt, Emily, for showing up, who, they not only showed up for supporting me, they showed up to represent a lot of people who are not here with us on this earth today, who had a major role in my life, who I feel the spirit in this room that they're here today. People like my Aunt Doris, my Aunt Margie, my grandmother, Gladys, my Uncle Lou, and my mother, who passed away a couple of months ago, and my father, who, and this is really key, I heard, Bracken, I heard you say something, and Erica heard you say something, and combined, that reminded me of my father. And what my dad used to always tell me, he didn't have a lot, but what he did have is he always said, never compromise the content of your character, ever, and that you have control over, and I never have. But I thank him for teaching me that lesson. And I want to say, you can feel it in you as well, Bracken, like the content of your character. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank my nuclear family, my 3 kids, Alex, Carmichael III, and Jaden, and who also talk about humility. We talk about humility, Bracken. There's nothing more humble than knowing no matter how hard you try as a parent, you can never get it perfect. And but there's nothing better than unconditional love, because they don't really care as much. They're proud of me, but they just see me as dad more than anything else, and I appreciate that. And last but not least, I want to thank my wife, Sandra, who listens to all my crazy ideas that I've had over the years. And, and instead of being a hater or a doubter, just figured, oh, what the hell? Let me just put a whole bunch of time in and taking crazy and helping this guy turn it into brilliant. And she co-owns this award. I thank you so much for that. As an aside, she heard me practice this speech. I had to leave that part out so she didn't hear me practice. But let's come back to people a bit, and let's come back to, actually, Bracken, I want to come back to something that you and I were talking about when we were sitting next to each other the other night. And you were talking about how you figured out, and I heard in the introduction, that pairs of people, 2 people, could make a huge difference. And even as you talked about yourself, and this is off the cuff because I didn't know what Bracken was going to talk about. But Bracken, you talked about yourself almost like 2 people. You said you fired yourself, you hired yourself, and then you evaluated. But there's something in that, in that realizing it takes 2 to tango, and you need a group to work around that. And innovators, and Edison got that. And he realized that he had to understand people more than anything, and that's what really drove innovation. If you kind of study Edison, he certainly admits that he's an inventor. He certainly appreciates ideas, but he also sometimes dismisses them and starts talking about how maybe he didn't invent much of anything. And in fact, true innovation is taking an idea and invention and molding it and turning it into something that's incredibly special, that's pervasive, that can impact all humans in society. That's innovation. That's what's really difficult. And that's Edison. And so when we think about that, Edison certainly did that with the Edison pioneers, 20 some odd people, including Lewis Latimer, each of which were Edison-like. Edison did that with J.P. Morgan, the financier who was his partner that eventually turned into GE. Edison certainly did that with his dear friend Henry Ford, who up to the day that Edison died, he worked really closely with Henry Ford. And so you can see the embodiment of Edison innovation was about people. I want to tell you about a person, and as an aside, I've been very fortunate. Some of the people mentioned today, working with George Whitesides and Bill Gates, that's sort of having a chance to really, in a two-person thing, really, have an excellent counterpart on the other side. I'm going to talk about a person who's not here with us today, who passed away on late February. Many of you may have known his name. If you don't, I want to tell you about him. He's a good friend of mine named Paul Farmer. Now, Paul, for those, and I see people shaking heads and so forth, and so I want to make sure those who don't know Paul Farmer, you know who Paul Farmer is. Paul Farmer in the last 50 years was unquestionably one of the top 5 people in the world in global health. Paul Farmer was number 1 as far as I'm concerned. I'm a little bit biased, but Paul was an amazing guy who, what Paul did was he was a infectious disease expert, and he would run into the fire whenever he saw a threat of a disease in a particular geography in the world. He didn't care where it was. Paul would run in there and he would stomp it out with the fear that if he didn't, not only would it hurt the local community, it would also have a huge impact on the world. We all know things can turn into a pandemic. Paul grabs me one day, this is about 12 years ago, and he said, "Carmack, let's go for a walk. I'm going to tell you something that's been on my mind about you." And this is very Edison-like, what Paul said as I reflect back on what my good friend told me. He said to me, "Carmack, I want to tell you a story about when I first was 20-something years old, a young doctor, and a group of us recognized that Haiti was under threat from tuberculosis, that Haiti could have a tremendous amount of death from TB, and the world needs to do something about it. And we young doctors, we got together, we went down to Haiti, we found a village where it was sort of right in the heart of everything, where you could tell that this is really where the worst threat is, where the infection is the greatest. They went down there, they got a little place, they set it up, little office. The next day, just as the rooster crows, they get up, they're crossing their fingers, mostly white males in the middle of Haiti. They're crossing their fingers and they're wishing, man, I hope somebody's outside, waiting for us. They look out, there's a line of 70-something people. They're high-fiving. They're like, oh, this is great. They open up the door, the first person comes in, is a woman with her son. She comes in and she says, I want you to take a look at my son's arm. He got something wrong with it. He fell down, and so they all look at each other. They're infectious disease doctors from Harvard Medical. So they're pausing for a second, like, what? And so they look and they realize he's got a hairline fracture, let's put a cast on him. Next person comes in and says, I've had problems with my eyes. I want you to take a look. They kind of look at each other and they realize, I think you got the early onset of glaucoma, so they give him some drops. The next person comes in and is amazingly, has some GI issues, some stuff wrong with their stomach. It turns out they're lactose intolerant. The next one comes in and has some issues with depression, and you get the story. Noon comes around, it's time for lunch. They shut the place down. They probably looked at 20 some odd people. They're exhausted and they're demoralized. They're all looking at each other saying, oh my God, I'm here to try and cure TB. And these people are walking in. We had one person come in with a hangnail. What are we going to do? These people are clueless. Except Paul is jubilant. He's excited. He's pumped. They're looking at Paul and saying, Paul, did you not see what we see? Did you not feel what we just felt? How could you be excited? He said, we're going to cure TB. And they said, Paul's lost it down here. Something must have bit him. And so they pause for a while, and Paul says, look outside. They said, yeah, we see the line is 3 times longer now. And he said, yeah, look, think, everybody. The reality right now is that line is longer because we're listening to what they say they need, and we're giving them what they need, not what we think they need, and they're beginning to trust us. And so at that moment, they start to go, yeah, you know what? He says, yeah, you know what we're going to do? Eventually, we're going to gain the trust of this whole place, and we're going to turn around and tell them why TB is an issue and why they need to listen to us, because they're going to trust us right back in that direction. And Paul Farmer cured TB in Haiti. Unbelievable. My good friend. Now, why did Paul tell me that story? See, I was mesmerized, and I'm going on this walk with this guy. He's this amazing guy, and he stopped and said, "This is not about me, this is about you." He said, "Look at me. Look at me." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're out there trying to keep the world healthy, fed, safe, warm, secure, empowered, just like I go after these things. You're innovating. And if you look at me really carefully, you'll see yourself. You'll see what," and he was trying to tell me what an Edison-like persona is and what really matters. And he said, "I'm so excited because I may not be here forever, and you're younger than me, and you're going to carry the torch, and you're going to fight a set of problems. You're going to be able to go any place in the world, and you're going to be able to go do this because you understand it's about people, and that's the thing that matters the most, and that's what innovation is about." That's what Paul Farmer told me, and he's an Edison Award like that. So I'm telling you this story for you, not for me, because here's the deal. We've got everything from young folks who are in this audience to some people who think they're retired, but you're not quite. and all of you have an opportunity to channel your Edison, and everybody who's here. And so I owe it to, like my good friend Paul Farmer told me, to tell you to look at me and look at yourself. You see, please do see yourself in that regard. Now, thank you, Bracken, for going a little bit over, because now I got a chance to go a little bit. I'm going to wind down, but at least I did all my intros. I promise I'm about to wind down now. So I want to wind down, and I want to say, like, I was sort of brainstorming on the Edison stuff with my daughter Jaden in the kitchen, who I told I may, start crying if I get up here and start talking to my family, so I made it through. But I want to tell the story of something that relates to my other daughter, Alex. We were together in New Orleans, and you never know what you got in common with one of your kids. We were in New Orleans, and we found this little bookshop. And we walked in, and the shop owner had the most amazing collection of readings by Langston Hughes. So Bracken, I'm not an English major, but man, I like Langston Hughes. Channeling my lit side of stuff. And I walk in there and I'm thinking to myself, ooh, that's my favorite, poet and so forth. And my daughter kind of edges me aside, links up with the shop owner, and they began to talk as if I'm not there. Next thing you know, I'm sitting in the corner for a doggone near an hour. And the two of them combed through all this Langston Hughes stuff, the unique stuff. And I realized at that moment, I never knew it, but my daughter and I shared the same favorite poet, Langston Hughes. And he wrote, Langston Hughes is famous for a lot of stuff, but I just want to say one line in one of my favorite poems, Harlem. And you may have heard the line before. It goes, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? And I always wondered, is he just, and then he goes through and he pretty much, through that short poem, describes, that question, but never answers it. It's just always left as a question. And I always thought to myself, are we supposed to answer it as a rhetorical? And I realized today that I actually want to answer that question for everyone. What happens to a dream deferred? For me, thank goodness, I think Mr. Hughes would be happy to know I will have no idea, because just like Eric Toon said, all I do is dream, and I feel really blessed that I'm in that situation. And on that note, I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank everybody here on behalf of Bracken and myself for the Edison Award. It means a lot.